everybody. Okay, so on this next series of videos that I'm doing for the appendicular skeleton, the second of 4, I'm going to be going over the upper limbs. And the upper limbs is made up of 60 bones, 30 on one side and 30 on the other, but 60 bones in total. Okay, and it's made up of 4 different types of bones. So we have, here we have the humerus, okay, which eventually is the one that articulates with the scapula. We have the radius, okay, with its flat head, this is the radius, and the ulna, it looks like a mouth of a snake. Okay. And then we have our manus, or hand, as our 4th major bone in our upper limb. Okay, so let's start with the humerus. Okay, so this is the humerus bone. Now, how we can tell if this is left or right, front, back. Okay, first of all, this head, this is the head, is going to have to be facing medially. Okay, and then here we have the olecranon fossa, which is this big fossa, as opposed to the little smaller fossas here in the front. Okay, so this olecranon fossa has to face posteriorly. So the head has to face medially, olecranon fossa has to face posteriorly. Process of elimination tells us this is going to be our left humerus. Okay. All right, so let's name some components of the humerus here. All right. Here we're going to have the head of the humerus. Okay. Now, immediately below it, we're going to have the neck. Now, there's 2 necks for the humerus. This is the anatomical neck immediately below the head, and this is the surgical neck that's going to be around the shaft of the humerus. Okay, now if we look, this is our left one. If we look here lateral, it's going to be the greater tubercle. So that's the greater tubercle. Okay. And here in the front, this is going to be called the lesser tubercle. Okay, so lesser tubercle, greater tubercle, and lesser tubercle. And in between these 2 tubercle is going to be called the intertubercular groove. Okay. Now, immediately below the greater tubercle, we're going to have this roughened part, which is called the deltoid tuberosity. And that's where the deltoid eventually goes over here and inserts on the deltoid tuberosity so we can be able to adduct, extend, and flex as well. So we have our head, our 2 necks, anatomical and surgical, our greater tubercle, lesser tubercle, okay, greater and lesser. And in between we have the intertubercular groove. And we have the deltoid tuberosity. Okay, now here as we go down, this is called the shaft. All right. Okay, now here in the bottom, we're going to have quite a few little things. Back here we have the olecranon fossa. Right? And in the front, here we have the coronoid fossa. And right beside it, we're going to have the radial fossa. So the coronoid fossa and the radial fossa. This part here that looks kind of like a spool or a pulley, that's going to be called the trochlea. And then lateral to it, we're going to have this. Kind of looks like the Washington Capitol. It's round. That's called the capitulum. Right. So trochlear, capitulum. Coronoid fossa, radial fossa, and olecranon fossa. Now here above the trochlea, we're going to have, this is going to be called the epicondyle. Since it's on the medial side, we're going to call it the medial epicondyle. Okay, so medial epicondyle. And on this side here, we're going to have the lateral epicondyle. Lateral epicondyle, medial epicondyle, lateral and medial. And this is called the arm, not the forearm, the arm. Okay? The forearm is going to be these 2. Made up of the ulna and the radius. Okay. Now the ulna, we'll start with this one here. Okay. The ulna is going to have this like mouth of a snake. This top part is going to be called the olecranon. Okay. This notch here is called the trochlear notch, and this down here is called the coronoid process. Okay. And here we're going to have the radial notch. Okay, radial notch. All right, so let's see why these notches are important. Well, the olecranon is going to articulate with the olecranon fossa of the humerus. The coronoid process is going to articulate with the coronoid fossa of the humerus. And the trochlear notch is going to articulate with the trochlea. So those, name all three of those articulations. Basically, they all have the same name, except that one's going to be a process and the other one's going to be a fossa. Okay. Now here, this radial notch is going to end up articulating with the head of the radius. Okay. Go with that. Right. Now this, although this looks like the head of a snake, okay, it's not the head. The head is actually, ironically, down here. This is the head, and the radial, and this is the head of the radius. So the heads are actually reciprocals of one another. All right, so here we go down to the shaft, and at the end of the ulna, we're going to have this little bump called the styloid process of the ulna. That little bump right there. Okay, which you can pretty much feel right here. Styloid process of the ulna. Little bump over here. Right there. Okay. All right, so that's it for the ulna. Let's go to the radius. The radius is going to have this flat head on the top. Here we have the radial tuberosity, this little bump, pretty big bump actually. It's like a kickstand. So when you pronate, with this like this, kind of stops it right there. So radial tuberosity. Okay, when you pronate, it kind of stops it right there. So we have the radial tuberosity, we have the shaft, and then we have the styloid process of the radius. Okay, the styloid process, got a little bump right outside here, little bump. So you feel these little two bumps here. Each one's a styloid process for the ulnar and for the radius. So let's go down here to the hand, which is our last component of the upper limb. Here I have our hand. So a way to memorize this, I have a mnemonic. Okay, it's kind of rated PG-13, I guess. But see this little bump right here? It's called a pisiform. Okay. Okay, so the pisiform will be this little bump right here. So the way to memorize it, just do like a typewriter. You go, some lovers try positions that they can't handle. Okay? So, scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum, pisiform, then trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, hamate. Okay, so those are your 8 carpal bones, by the way. Those are carpal bones, which are your wrist bones. Then finally here, we're going to have your, sorry, this little tape. I had to hold this together, so I apologize. See if you can do it like that better. All right, so here, these are going to be called the metacarpals. Metacarpals. And these are called the phalanges. Okay? We have a proximal and a distal phalanx. A proximal and a distal. And on the 2 through 5, we're going to have a proximal, a middle, and a distal phalanx. Okay, and that takes care of our hand. All right, so that's basically the upper appendage, and we'll do the third part of this 4-part series of the appendicular skeleton next, which is going to be the pelvic girdle. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.